She was born a princess, but fate turned her into one of the longest-serving leaders in modern history. Wars, crises, the end of an empire, a technology revolution, family scandals, and finally, the closing of an era. This is the story of Queen Elizabeth II, from her marriage to her rise to the throne, her way of leading, and her death, through one word that defined her life: duty. Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born on April 21, 1926, in London. At first, she did not look like the future queen. Other people were ahead of her in line for the throne, but in 1936, everything changed. King Edward VIII gave up the throne. Elizabeth's father became King George VI, and suddenly, Elizabeth moved much closer to becoming queen one day. One of the biggest turning points in her personal life was meeting Prince Philip. Some stories mention earlier encounters, but the most famous moment happened in July 1939, during a visit to the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. Elizabeth was 13. Philip was 18, a naval cadet. They spent time together, and a real connection started. Then, World War II arrived. Philip served at sea. Elizabeth stayed within royal life, preparing for responsibility. Their relationship grew through letters during the war years. After the war, that bond became a promise. Their engagement was announced in 1947. Before the wedding, Philip took several official steps. He became a British citizen, used the surname Mountbatten, and received the title Duke of Edinburgh. Then, on November 20th, 1947, they married at Westminster Abbey in London. Britain was still recovering from the war. People watched the wedding and felt something bigger than romance. It looked like hope. It felt like a step toward normal life again. They had 4 children: Charles in 1948, Anne in 1950, Andrew in 1960, and Edward in 1964. For decades, Philip played a difficult role. He was the Queen's husband, not a king. Still, he became her strongest support. He was also known as someone who spoke his mind, even inside a very controlled royal world. Elizabeth knew she would become queen someday, but the moment came suddenly. On February 6, 1952, her father, King George VI, died while Elizabeth was on an official trip in Kenya. She was only 25 years old. In one day, her entire life changed. From that point on, she showed a very controlled style, quiet, careful, and disciplined. She was not a politician. She did not run for office, but millions watched her. And in hard times, the country wanted a steady symbol that did not change with elections. Her coronation took place on June 2, 1953. This was important for another reason, too. Television helped bring the ceremony to a huge audience. The monarchy stepped into the modern media age in a way it never had before. Her role was not to make political decisions in public. Britain is a constitutional monarchy. The Queen's power is limited by law and tradition. Her main job was to represent continuity, stability, and neutrality. One of her most regular duties was a weekly meeting with the Prime Minister. Over her reign, many prime ministers came and went, starting with Winston Churchill and continuing through Anthony Eden, Harold Macmillan, Alec Douglas Hume, Harold Wilson, Edward Heath, James Callaghan, Margaret Thatcher, John Major, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, and Liz Truss. In these meetings, the Queen listened, asked questions, and sometimes warned or advised privately. But she did not publicly take sides. That quiet influence was one reason the monarchy survived in the modern world. During her reign, Britain changed deeply. The old empire faded, and the Commonwealth became more central. Elizabeth became a key symbol of that group of nations. She traveled widely and tried to keep strong ties, especially with countries like Canada, Australia, and many nations in Africa. Her message stayed consistent: connection, tradition, and long-term relationships. A long reign also means long pressure, and her time on the throne included major crises for the royal family and the institution itself. In 1977, her Silver Jubilee marked 25 years as queen. The celebrations showed that many people still felt close to the monarchy. But 1992 was a different story. Elizabeth called it her Annus Horribilis, meaning horrible year. Several family marriages broke down and became public. At the same time, a major fire damaged Windsor Castle. Public debate grew louder. Who should pay for royal costs? That moment pushed the monarchy to look more open and more modern. In the years after, the palace made changes in how it handled money and public life. Then came 1997, the death of Princess Diana. This became one of the biggest public tests of Elizabeth's life. People around the world were overwhelmed with emotion. Many felt the royal family's first reaction was too distant. Later, the Queen spoke to the nation and adjusted the public tone. The lesson was painful but clear. The monarchy had to understand public feeling, not only tradition. As time went on, Elizabeth walked a narrow path between tradition and change. She did not modernize through sudden revolution. She modernized slowly, carefully, and in controlled steps. Her goal was to keep the monarchy alive as a living institution, not a museum piece. On September 9, 2015, she reached another historic milestone. She became the longest reigning monarch in British history, passing Queen Victoria. It was more than a record. It showed how her reign stretched across 2 centuries, from the post-war world into the digital age. In 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, she gave a rare televised message to the nation. It focused on unity and endurance. That was her role in a crisis, not political leadership, but moral and symbolic stability. In 2021, she faced a deep personal loss. On April 9, 2021, Prince Philip died. They had been married for 73 years. For Elizabeth, this was not only the loss of a husband, but the loss of her closest lifelong partner. One image became unforgettable. At his funeral, because of pandemic rules, she sat alone. That picture became a symbol of the time and of her private grief. In 2022, the country celebrated her Platinum Jubilee, marking 70 years on the throne. But her health was clearly declining. On September 6, 2022, she met the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. It was one of the last times the public saw her performing her duty. 2 days later, on September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth II died at Balmoral. She was 96 years old. The moment her death was announced, a long-planned national protocol began, known to the public as Operation London Bridge. Britain entered a period of mourning. Her coffin was brought from Scotland to London. Huge crowds waited for hours to pay respect, forming lines that stretched for miles. On September 19, 2022, a state funeral was held at Westminster Abbey. Afterward, she was buried at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, beside Prince Philip. In the end, Elizabeth's story is not just a royal biography. It is the story of what duty can do to a human life. She faced love, pain, praise, and criticism with the same discipline. While the world transformed, she often remained the steady face inside that change. And that is why, when she died, so many people felt the same thing. An era ended.